Thank you. Well, so welcome to this presentation about greater social diversity in business schools. We should thank MBS and Tima Bansal, Garima Sharma, and all the team at MBS. So maybe we may begin by Chantal, we introduce each other.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I am Chantal Dardelet, and I'm the director for Equality of Opportunity Center here in ESSEC Business School. I'm also executive director for the Transition, Social and Ecological Transition in ESSEC Business School in France. But today it will be with mainly on equality of opportunity programs we talk about.
And I am Adrián Zicari, professor also at ESSEC. I'm academic director of the Center of, Council of Business and Society, which is an alliance of 7 business schools led by ESSEC. And that's it. And Chantal, maybe you wish that I show the slides and you tell me, maybe it's easier.
So I show my screen. Is it okay for you?
Great.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm very pleased to be there with you and talk about social diversity. And to start with just a few words about Together. In 2020, ESSEC launched the Together strategic initiative, which aims at fulfilling a complete ecological and social transition in our school. The process intends to consider environmental and societal issues in all aspects of the school, transformation of teaching, of research, but also transformation of campus life and so on. This approach towards the transition is based on several action plans. Of course, a climate and carbon neutrality plan, a sorting and circular economy plan, but also a diversity and inclusion plan, which we will discuss here. This diversity and inclusion plan is rooted in a strong commitment made by ESSEC Business School. For nearly 20 years, our school has been acting in favor of greater social diversity among our students by helping to reduce inequalities in access to higher education. In fact, ESSEC has played an important role in the issue of equal opportunity applied to the field of education and access to higher education. This commitment is in line with the Sustainable Development Goal number 10. So in this session, I will share with you our experience in social diversity in ESSEC. Then Adrián will explain how this can apply into classrooms, and we will then open the room for discussion on how to go further. Okay? So this is Together. And now questions: why fighting against social inequalities? How? For which impact? How did we do different scale-ups? Which consequences for ESSEC itself, and then perspectives? Just this small diagram. It shows in blue, somewhere here, the rate of working class children, and in gray, the rate of executive children. Has written here, in France, a child of a blue-collar worker is 7 times less likely than a child of a senior manager or teacher to access higher education. So from left to right, you see the respective rates of the general French population here, quite more children from blue-collar workers' parents. And then in high school, and then in the entrance of higher education, and then master and doctorate level. As you can see, throughout the school system, the percentage of working class children decreases. The school system acts like a distillation column that gradually eliminates children from working class backgrounds. As a result, a school like ESSEC, which is somewhere here, has a lot of trouble welcoming real social diversity among its students. So we wanted to change that. And, oh, sorry, here. And let's say 20 years ago, we started a program called Why Not Me? A top business school, why not me? And how, by two main levels. First, involving our own students in a tutoring program for high potential middle school students and high school students from working class backgrounds. And these pupils went each week coming and meet our own students. What for? To enable these pupils to develop the socio-cultural capital that is required to project themselves into an ambitious and a chosen higher education way. What is done during these tutoring moments? We help the pupils to know themselves and then to know the field of possibilities in higher education. That means, I think at that time, 13,000 kinds of possibilities. Then we help them to make their own choice, either to become an engineer or to become a lawyer or to become a manager, whatever they want to do. And then we help themselves to get their own place. So that means to convince that they are the right student for these studies. And last but not least, we help them to anticipate the expectations of higher education. That means to develop their own soft skills, for instance, adaptation, for instance, network, and so on. That was 20 years ago. And 10 years ago, first studies shown that the program works. Kevin André, who was a teacher at ESSEC, has prepared his thesis about these questions. And his thesis showed that there are a double transformation. For the secondary school students, as you can see on the scheme here, this is in general population in French. When you are poor, let's say, only 35% of the pupils reach a diploma 5 years after baccalaureate. But when we accompany them with ESSEC program, these ones, they are 77%. That means the same as the whole French population. That means that we can come back to a real equality of opportunity by accompanying them correctly. This is one of the lessons of the thesis of Kevin André. Another impact was about money. Oh, sorry, money, what we call the social return on investment. Another study showed that each time the French government put €1 in the program, to private money, €2 are given by companies and so on. And these €3 built €9 of social value. That means that it's quite interesting for government to invest in these pupils because they are quite, let's say, money back when they earn their own lives with good jobs and so on. So it's interesting because of ambitions, that is the social impact, but also in the money impact. And I thought, yes, there is a third consequence that is quite interesting. It's also very good for our own students. Another study showed that for the students involved in the tutoring program, these students develop also specific leadership skills that are quite interesting. And the other students from ESSEC who haven't been tutors don't develop these same skills. So this is interesting. We have more than 1,500 ESSEC students that have been tutors. So that means that it's a high level for us. I come back here just to explain that we started in 2002 only with 20 beneficiaries. But little by little during these last 2 decades, we went from 20 beneficiaries to 200,000 young people. How? We started in 2002. 3 years later, other grandes écoles in France used the same model and started the same proposal with pupils around their own school. In 2008, the government started what we call les cordées de la réussite. This is a public policy using the same level as what we do in the Why Not Me program. And from that time, we had more than 1,000 beneficiaries. And it went on with either public decision, for instance, deploying more cordées de la réussite, and we reached 20,000 towards 2012. And 3 years later, we are in 2015, ESSEC launched a new program called Trouve ta voie, Find Your Path, I don't know how we could say that, which has a new way to change things. The principle is that high schools deploy tutoring within the classes. That means teachers now do the same thing as what our tutors did before. So this is another way to change scale. And today, ESSEC reaches 80,000 young people with Trouve ta voie, with 350 partner schools. At that time, we are still, French government still continuing in that direction. So we hope that in a few months, we will reach 200,000 young people. So starting from a small initiative in ESSEC Business School, little by little, we try to change all that. What can we say more? I'm looking at my watch. So we thought that Why Not Me has a real impact on our students. And ESSEC from that date on has decided to continue. So first a chair was created, what is called Leadership and Diversity Chair with Professor Junko Takagi. So that means that we are very interested in diversity questions, of course. We also had another program called CAP-ESSEC program that was launched in 2010 to increase our own social diversity of students admitted in our own training in ESSEC. And thanks to that, in 10 years, we have 4 times more scholarship students than we had before. So today, 22% of our own students are scholarship students, so come from rather underprivileged background, sorry. Of course, at the same time, we have to provide significant financial assistance for these students. And for instance, in September this year, ESSEC will have 50% more scholarships for our students. What else can we add? Yes, we have a specific support for these students because when they enter in ESSEC, maybe Adrián will talk about that. Since, well, we have to be quite close to them to help them to find really their own place in our schools. That's what we call the inclusion, of course, in our school. But maybe next step will be next year in 2022. The process is to recruit our students will be a little adapted to take into account, of course, always the academic level of the students, but also their life path. For instance, we know that when they come from underprivileged background, generally speaking, they have specific skills regarding adaptability or skills like that, which are quite important at that time. So today at ESSEC, 20 years later, we have a global approach to social diversity with 5 axes and 5 types of actions. As we discussed before, we continue in the directions of Cordées de la Réussite, so for equal opportunities in access to higher education, as we said before. We continue social diversity in the recruitment of ESSEC students, and more. We hope to have 27% in 3 years. We also, of course, have support during studies, as we said before, to ensure real inclusion in the academic life, but also in the student life. And then also we develop the social awareness of all the students. We think that all the students must change the view they have on diversity. They must find that diversity is an opportunity for everybody, and today not sure everybody knows that. So we have to develop this awareness. And also we continue to introduce systemic transformation in our society, in our school system, for instance, working with the high schools and so on, to change the perspective of diversity and inclusion. So this plan is really at the heart of ESSEC sustainable development strategy, even if, of course, we also work on the environment question. So that's what I wanted to share with you at that time. Maybe Adrián, I'll let you continue.
Yes, right, yes. May you please? Yes, thank you. So here I'm going to be very, very short. So now the idea is once that students have access to the school, in large part due to all these tools that Chantal explained very well. So what happens? So access is not success necessarily. So the idea is what happens, particularly in the classroom. We may talk about other aspects of student life, but I'm going to focus on the classroom. So here I took a picture some time ago in the classroom. So so thank you. Maybe yes. So just to put in the context, I am professor at ESSEC from 2009. I'm in the accounting faculty. I teach a variety of courses in conventional accounting, so I exaggerate a bit variable and fixed costs, and I have many courses in sustainability. And this is, I would say, that the proportion of sustainability is growing compared to the conventional conventional courses. And I'm active in different levels, so undergraduate, graduate, and etc. So I share some elements. I'm not sure it's a very structured methodology for making students succeed. I'm far from that, but at least some ideas that may I would say, I wouldn't say tips, but some ideas that could be useful, and hopefully would like to share them with you. So the first issue I see in the classroom is that students tend to, and this is human nature, they tend to let's say gather among equals or similar. And here and this is a pity because each one of us has many interesting things to or ideas to share. So I do my best to mix them as much as I can. For instance, when organizing groups, it seems silly, but I do not leave students organize groups themselves. I'm in a very undemocratic fashion, and I'm in this way proud of this small undemocracy. I organize groups myself, trying to mix the more I can. Then during sessions, I try to bring examples and references from other parts of the world. So, and this is a problem because in many textbooks, examples come from North America and Europe, and well, the world is a bit larger than that. And it's important also as me, not only for diversity reasons, but because well, there are managers, and managers can work anywhere in the world and need to understand what happens beyond the usual borders. Close to this, but it's a bit different. teaching cases, I want to bring different contexts. So it's not always the merger and acquisition, it's not always a company that launches a new product. It can be situations that are linked with an NGO, addressing a social problem, sometimes based in the South as well. So the idea is that management is universal and can address different problems, not necessarily problems for for-profit organization, or problems that whose result is measured only in terms of profits. Then another point that my experience is that, well, I would say I'm a fan of teaching cases and class discussions. However, I realize that in many cases, some students, and this can be related to their culture, their social context, so they're not familiar with speaking up. So here it's part of us as educators to make an effort to invite these people, to bring them inside of the discussion. So not only that they are there in the classroom, but they really take part in the class dynamics. Which leads sometimes to the next point, is sometimes, and this is, I think that technology can be of great help nowadays, is to look for complementary ways of participation. For instance, surveys or some media tools that can help us to, let's say, to bring students' participation beyond the conventional ways of speaking up. Beyond the classroom, and it's also attached to our role of educators, frequently we have the occasion to advise students, either in a more formal or informal way. And here I have some concerns that I would like to share with you. Is students coming from underprivileged backgrounds, and this is completely understandable and normal. Well, they need to to rapidly, let's say, take the payback, so the payback from their investment. This is normal. So in many cases, it's difficult to invite the students to consider a career in NGOs or anything that is more related to sustainability, even if those students would be themselves interested in the issue. So maybe here, and this is part of our, again of our expertise of educators, to advise them to look for a path that could be, of course, possible for them, but at the same time that leaves the door open to their future aspirations. Maybe not necessarily linked with sustainability. Many students cannot begin an entrepreneurial project from graduation. They are entrepreneurs, they feel entrepreneurs, but my advice would be, well, work in a company, make a few years experience, and then maybe some years you have the expertise, the acumen, the business acumen to develop your own project. And I would say something similar about this involvement in sustainability issues. Well, I think this is my 2 cents about access and success in the classroom. Thank you. Yes, now the idea is the most important part, the most interesting part is to have your views, to open some kind of discussion. I understand that our view, Chantal and I, show a reality maybe it's not, surely it's not the same reality elsewhere, but we speak from our situation in France.
Adrián, would you, if you could stop sharing, we can see each other and maybe we can have a more sort of personal discussion. Well, I mean, like I was saying at the top of the hour, this was really kudos to you for doing this. I think we need all universities to think about social diversity, and it's just fantastic that you're thinking about it. You know, the only thing that I was trying to reconcile in my head was that, you know, the tutoring program, like the students from your university, I'm assuming come from wealthier backgrounds, and then they go in and sort of tutor students from lower socioeconomic background. So how do you manage that power dynamic where it doesn't seem like, you know, somebody already higher in the socioeconomic hierarchy is coming and telling me what to do? Like, how do you prepare your students to not impose, you know?
That's a good question.
Well, in Why Not Me program, when we recruit the ESSEC students to become tutors, we first tell them, you know something, but they know a lot of things too. So it's not the situation where you will tell them what to do, how it works, and so on. It's just a situation that where you will tell them something, but they will teach you a lot of things too, because they come from our society, but they have a completely different point of view, and you have to hear that. This will be interesting for you tomorrow as a manager to have a quite largest view of the society. So first we try to explain them, you are not there and them they should be there. You are just in the same society and you will bring something to the other, first of all, because sometimes our students think that they are quite better than the other. Maybe it's true on several points of view, but not all. So this is the first thing. And we interview them first to know why they want to become a tutor. And to some of them we say, oh, no, it will not be for you. For instance, because they are as a charity business. So we will tell these poor pupils how it works. No, we don't want that. So it's really a matter of they have to have the good position towards our young people. This is the first thing. And to have the humility to think that they will learn a lot of things there too. And then it's also a wonderful human adventure. They discover words they don't know. They discover that they knew a lot of things, even if they don't always have the right codes. They don't know the norms. So sometimes they're just besides, and little by little, there is a real relationship that is built, and it's quite interesting. One day I saw 4 of our oldest young people, and they were going to the wedding of their tutors. So it was a meeting between completely different social backgrounds, and in fact they discovered that I had a lot of things to bring one to another.
That's great.
I don't know.
Thank you. Yeah,
your question.
Thank you.
I have one kind of 2 points. One is just a very quick, you know, pedagogical trick or tool. Adrián, I actually really like it that you said that you assign students to groups, because I tend to do the same. I don't let students choose. And this sounds autocratic at first, but as you said, I actually use a little, you know, trick. I give them an introversion, extroversion test from a best-selling book by Susan Cain, and then kind of put them in groups based on how supposedly self-rated they're, you know, on introversion, extroversion scale. And what's really interesting is that actually culturally, usually there is no difference. So, you know, the stereotypes that an Asian Austrian would be more introverted than white Austrian does not necessarily apply. I'm based in Austria at the moment. And those at the end of the semester almost always show up in my evaluations, that students at the end love working with people who are character-wise slightly somehow connect better, but they still end up being really, really diverse groups from the ethnic or social background perspective. So it actually has been always a good trick to use.
Sorry, Milda, so you put half the group as introverts and half of them are profess extroverts?
I give them a little self
Yeah.
quiz on that, and then I put, let's say, 5 groups in class, 5 class groups or 4 groups, and I literally say, the most introverted group, the slightly less introverted.
Oh,
So I don't mix introverts with extroverts. I'm not sure how much the quiz, does justice anyways. But what ends up being almost always that introverts love working with each other because they find space to speak up finally, and they're more comfortable with silences. And that also later brings them out in the class discussion, surprisingly. And extroverts discover that that's really fun, but they end up sometimes on the more superficial outcome level. And then that all brings something into the class. So it's a crazy approach, but it's worked really, really well. Yeah.
So happy of learning this. So thank you, Milda.
I can send you the quiz. It's just the 20 question, and of course, if you scored from 1 to 10, you're introvert. From 11 to 20, you're extrovert. It doesn't, it's an on the spot game, but they end up always mentioning that later in the course that they.
Milda, if you can send it in the link right now, I wouldn't mind seeing this too.
I'll look.
I want to self-evaluate. So, am I the introvert I think I am?
They're also ambiverts, so a lot of them are somewhere in the middle, and those tend to be the mixed groups, but this really the more cultural diversity aspect. And my second point is more maybe, I don't know if it's provocative per se, but what I usually find is that students do have a quite some diversity awareness, just because they're so connected today, via social media, and they follow influencers from very different backgrounds. And I find, at least at our university, that oftentimes professors are an issue. And, I have students coming up to me and see that they're afraid to speak up because of us, not because of other students in class. That they're afraid that their opinions will not be listened to, that they'll be downgraded, and I had an incident of Asian Austrian telling me that Austrian professors would downgrade anything she would try to say about Taiwan, even though she was from there originally, because that challenged their old textbook understanding. So I wanted to ask Adrián and Chantal if you're doing any professor mentoring, or if that's too scary to even try at an institution, because I'm sure here it would not work. So
that's a good point. Indeed, we don't have any, as far as I remember at this moment, we don't have a particular structured approach to this. So these are mostly I would say tricks of the trade that we share in the cafeteria. I think that my impression is that my colleagues are very, very positive, open about. In fact, this is what ESSEC is. They are very, very, very international, very, very, very mixed, very diverse. But I'm not sure. Yes, we don't have a structured approach for this, even for small things. Maybe it's a detail, an anecdote. Recently, a colleague told us that she discovered that for slides it's better to use a particular type of letter. This type of letter is a type of letter because people with how to say visual impairment can better see this. And this is something we didn't I never thought about this. And yes, I think that we would gain from having a more structured approach to this kind of thing. Yes, definitely.
I think just an open conversation, because professors tend to assume that, we preach diversity, but there's not, at least at our university, there's not much open conversation about how we actually live it in the classroom, being ourselves in such a hierarchical position at the front of the classroom.
Yes, indeed.
I just want to echo Milda's point that I think that the colleagues, the faculty, are the hardest to change, and including myself. I don't know what biases I have, and inevitably I have them. But then one of my most pivotal learning moments was when we had a faculty retreat And the topic was on diversity, primarily gender diversity. I thought, I'm a woman, I get it. I don't think I need to go. And then when I went, I didn't realize how hidden these issues were within our faculty community. And that even in this discussion of gender diversity, I was mansplained so many times during that session. I just thought, I just didn't see it, but it's everywhere. And I just think it's hardest to change ourselves and our colleagues. And yet if we can't change, I don't know how we can expect our students to change. And sustainability arguably is one of those issues as well. That how are we ever going to get sustainability in the classroom if everybody's always teaching profit maximization? So yeah. Anyway, it's interesting. Uni, you put your video on. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I have been listening. Sorry, by the way, I had microphone off and I was running there doing my errand. So, but anyway, I'm thinking here that maybe. Of course, we have to do things in the classroom, but it's very important that we somehow fix the system, how we get the students in. And the main problem is there. And I'm, for example, from a university where we had very diverse background of the students, and I didn't see any problems there in the classrooms. Oh, well, that was a long time ago, early 90s, but still, I kind of felt that, okay, we are in the same boat anyway, and Finland is quite special case anyway, but then really here in Finland and elsewhere, even bigger problem is really that how we get more diversity in the selection, and we have very technocratic, or that's sort of like a measurement, how to say, we have a very automatized system in Finland that we look to the grades when students apply in, or you can go to the exams and then you just look what are the outcomes from the exams to get in. So we are just looking the numbers typically. There are some exceptions, but that's the thing. And I think that has worked really well for long. And I think that has worked better than in other countries, that basically when you look to the CVs and extracurricular activities and that sort, and you do interviews, if you are not paying attention to that sort of diversity issues, you select the ones who are coming from the elite families, and then the problems get bigger. But now I think actually that system where you do interviews and where you can have more qualitative like interpretation of the situation, you could do the better thing, you could have a better results, but that requires really that you understand that, okay, what's the issue, and we need to do the change. And there are supportive systems like how you handle the funding for the students coming from different backgrounds and so forth. But now I see that actually this great system that we have had here in Finland actually is a little bit like a behaving against for some students, because it is just so that students coming from good families, from elite families, they get better support during the studies, they get better grades early on, and it is much easier for them to get to the university positions then. Yes, that's what I have done talking.
I also think in the United States, because of the pandemic, it's such a great natural experiment happening this year around, increasing the diversity, because they took away SATs, which is the entrance exams. And usually if you correlate SAT scores with socioeconomic status, they're highly positively correlated, So if I'm wealthier, I'll perform better because of tutoring and high school and whatnot. Now that's taken out, all this huge pool of students from lower socioeconomic background, Yale, Harvard, like all these Ivy League schools are receiving these applications. And so I think for them, the experiment now is like how many of the accepted students actually show up because of, financial support. And once they show up, how do they do? So I hope somebody is studying that, but I just think that we are really, we have an opportunity to really understand sort of the success and access. How do they go hand in hand? I was also curious, Adrián and Chantal, about implications for sustainability centers. Do you guys work with the center? In your opinion, how can sustainability centers support the kind of work you're doing?
sustainability centers. I would say we are working hand in hand because Chantal is my activity, also my extra academic activity, if I can say, institutional activity is in this sustainability center that we call Together. So to put it okay. Yes, I have one concern here is that in many cases this is something we discussed in one of the previous discussions, is one of the many of these students coming from underprivileged backgrounds, you do not tend to be interested in sustainability. So sustainability in many cases, I'm maybe exaggerating a bit, remains a kind of nice thing for people who have the means and say, well, now I have the means, I can devote myself to this. And this is something that at some moment we would like to address. But part of the efforts, I think, is how to make sure that the students also become interested in these elements.
I just have to say that I've had a very different experience, that the international students, we have Latin Americans, we have some in Africa, we get primarily Nigerian, but and maybe some Asians as well, but that they are so focused on sustainability, especially Latin American and African students, and some of the ones from India, less so from China. So it was a really, really pleasant surprise that they tend to be the most vocal and the most, I don't even know what to say, but the most active in those classes that are sustainability oriented. Anyway, so it's interesting, Adrian, that your experience is
maybe my nuance here in our school. Oftentimes international students already have some means, so maybe they come from a poor country, but they are the rich people in the poor country. So
I think that's true though for us, but you're right that ESSEC though, yeah, may be still in a different class, but at least the Ivy Business School in Canada is considered to be one of the most elite. So rather than being the most whatever egalitarian, nevertheless, yeah, but it is interesting. Maybe it's true in France.
Adriana, I'd be curious because I also have similar experience in this TEMA, but that's more international aspect. And I wonder if the students you're reaching out to, you said the blue collar family backgrounds, are they actually mostly from migrant or ethnically diverse backgrounds, or not necessarily? Do you have any statistics on that?
From local students in France, and this is part of the law, and this is part of, well, I'm not French, but I've been living in France for 11 years. So it's something that we and I say we do not want to have ethnic statistics. It's something that is against the Republic. Okay, so we are French. All French are French. Okay.
Oh, I remember the World Cup.
So it's something. Sorry, it's a decision taken many years ago. We stand by that decision. The only statistic we have is if somebody comes from this or that country. I mean, it's an international student. In that case, yes, we know. But then, as far as it's a local student, this is.
Yes, maybe I can.
Yes.
As we say, we cannot have ethnic statistics in France, but since we know quite very well the young people we work with, we can say that about 80% of them has parents or grandparents coming from everywhere in the world. So there are only few people, native French from a long time. Because in France, statistically speaking, more poor people come from migrations. So we don't choose them because they are coming from immigration, but we mainly choose people from underprivileged background, as we said before, and often their families come from everywhere in the world.
Yes, so it makes Adrián's comment, I think, a really fascinating and valid one, and that, you know, desire to first make it for oneself, right? And only then say, I'll care about sustainability. And how do you, I would like to hear from others too, because I loved your question, you know, how do we convince people that actually they could also start an NGO or social enterprise, or that they could be wonderful change makers? How do we inspire them when their families are probably saying, get an education to be an engineer or a doctor only, right? In the best case scenario.
Well, maybe they can involve in these activities later on. I mean, this is part of my responsibility as an educator. I would like them to do something which is, let's say, viable. So maybe my suggestion is, well, maybe instead of launching your own being a social entrepreneur, maybe you can work in a company in a CSR area and learn the tricks of the trade, and then in a few years, I mean, this is something that it's one by one. Yes.
Directly related, but in the US, there's a fair amount of emphasis on sort of environmental racism and environmental justice. And so those are kind of lenses that focus on the ways that kind of pollution and other environmental harms disproportionately impact sort of communities of color and poor communities. And those are kind of topics within the environmental field that have traditionally been led by, you know, people from those communities, people with ties to communities. Because I think the overall sort of environmental movement focused on nature, focused on kind of parks, focused on wildlife has, yeah, disproportionately
Better. One thing though that strikes me too is, and I'm going to go back to this other point, that the invisibility of a lot of the issues that we create. And what we noticed was that a lot of our case studies that we use have male protagonists. And not only do they have male protagonists, so the CEO of such company is making a decision. The CEO is almost always a man, and almost always with an Anglo-Saxon name. And so inevitably people don't see themselves as a CEO, or you know, it just becomes a very gender biased, race biased conversation. But even stuff like the partner of the CEO is, you know, of the opposite gender. So we don't even involve the LGBTQ community. And so they're heterosexual white males that run companies. And I don't think anybody even noticed. And all we have to do really simply is to have a few case studies in every course where the partner is just said they're the partner, or the partner becomes the same gender, or the protagonist has a name that's different from an Anglo-Saxon name, or a gender that's different. I think those small cues can make a huge difference in the inclusivity. And then we tend to also focus on the big companies, right? The airline industry. We used to have like 8 case studies on the airline industry, and we don't have underrepresented, like, I don't think there's one case about cooperatives. And I think that diversity in what we teach, not just the topics of what we teach, but how we represent, how we represent those conversations in class. And we didn't even notice that we had these biases until someone raised it. And the other invisibility thing is that, you know, now we have so we have diversity training, but we have stickers that people put on their doors, and they're LGBTQ stickers, but we also have an ally group that just basically allies with anybody that's different. And I think that's acknowledgement that you identify with, or that you support, or whatever, that diversity is really important, visible statement. So all of those things, I think, help people within different diverse communities feel like they belong.
I'm here in terms of teaching cases. I think that going forward, I think there is easier things to do and more complicated things to do. So it's easier to put more diverse characters. This is something we can do. But I'm afraid we risk keeping the same type of cases. So saying, well, you have to solve the issue. Mainly 2 points. I'm not going to want to become too technical, but one thing is this idea that somebody decides and the rest of the organization implements. So it doesn't matter if it is Mary, Peter, Paul, whatever, or I mean, if we keep this idea, this separation between somebody who thinks and the rest to implement, we have a problem. And the other point is about, well, considering other impacts, not only exclusively economic impacts, which are important. Of course, the company needs to be profitable, but in many cases, I don't see this, the impact on stakeholders. We mentioned this, we said this, but then at the end of the day, the case and say, well, did you make much more? Okay, yes, that's fine. And this is,
and that really gets to Maya's point about environmental justice, that we never think about the impact on the communities, that, you know, so it's about profits, but how do you distribute those profits? And,
yes, indeed.
Well, we have just a few minutes left, so maybe we can get a few minutes break before the networking. So I just want to thank Adrián and Chantal for your engagement and, you know, all the work that you're doing and all the questions and answers. And, you know, I don't know if you have any last comments to make before we wrap up.
Oh, thank
I
you.
think that yes, please, Chantal, please.
No, thank you for this moment. Maybe one day we'll talk about a new tool we're working on that is called the diversity fresco. I don't know if it's the right English word. I think, you know, the climate fresco du climat, you understand what it means? Quite used here in France to make everybody conscious of the climate crisis. And a few months ago at ESSEC, we have launched the equivalent, but to make everybody conscious of the inequalities questions. So maybe one day, if this tool become used in a lot of business school and engineering school, maybe we can change the relationship with every person, taking the differences as a strength. That's what we hope for the coming years.
Yes, I may add that tool it goes very much in line, Tima, with the idea of invisibility. So we realize many of the invisibilities that we ourselves didn't know. On my side, I'm very thankful, grateful for this invitation, and well, we're learning by doing. This is